The alarm didn't go off. That's the first thing Alex noticed. Instead, it was the soft, persistent buzz of his phone vibrating against the cheap, i.e. a knitstand, the sound muffled by a half-empty glass of water and a dog-eared copy of a book he'd been meaning to finish for 6 months. He opened one eye. The room was the same shade of 5:47 a.m. gray it always was on a Monday. Seattle's winter dawn was just a rumor behind the clouds, a faint lightening from black to dark blue outside his Capitol Hill apartment window. He fumbled for the phone, the cold glass of the screen pressing against his warm palm. The light was blinding, not a sunrise but the white glare of his fitness app. Day 14, time to reset. It chirped at him in cheerful, punishing font. A little digital trophy icon spun hopefully below the text. He'd seen this screen 18 times. 18 day 14 resets over the last year and a half. It was less of a reset and more of a grave marker. He swiped the notification away, and his thumb, acting on muscle memory, opened Instagram. The first post was from at CrossFit Games, a teaser for the 2025 season. A slow-motion shot of a woman, muscles cabled like ship rope, flipping a tire the size of a small car. The caption screamed, "Elite fitness is built on consistency and community. Are you in?" Alex felt the familiar, sour cocktail of feelings in his gut. Inspiration, mixed with envy, chased by a thick wave of fatigue. He was 31 years old, a marketing manager for a sustainable coffee startup. He knew the language of optimization. He had the tools. He had the $200 a month membership to the boutique gym down on Union Street, the one with the exposed brick and the neon sign that said, "Grind." He had the fancy water bottle, the stack of colorful resistance bands still in their packaging, and the Peloton bike in the corner of his living room that his roommate jokingly called the guilt rack. But here he was, in the dark, his lower back stiff from 10 hours at a standing desk the day before, feeling as far from that tire-flipping athlete as he did from the moon. He dragged himself out of bed. The hardwood floor was icy under his feet. He walked past the Peloton, giving it the same side-eye you'd give a friend who'd let you down. In the kitchen, the red light on his smart scale glowed like a judgmental eye. He didn't step on it. Instead, he opened the fridge, the light illuminating a lineup of plastic meal prep containers, each holding precisely 4 ounces of chicken, 150 grams of sweet potato, and a cup of broccoli. They looked like science experiments, not food. He closed the door. The ping was sharp, intrusive. A Slack notification from his boss, Mark, at 5:52 a.m. "Alex, looping you in on the Q1 Synergy deck. Thoughts before the 8 a.m. call?" The day hadn't officially started, and already the digital leash was tugging. This was the routine. The quiet, private theater of his morning. The gap between the person he was supposed to be, the optimized, high-performing, tire-flipping version, and the person he actually was, tired, achy, and managing a low-grade panic that he was forever behind. He opened his gym's app, his thumb hovering over the reserve spot, button for the 6:30 a.m. Iron Circuit class. He could see the little avatars of 12 other people already booked in. He imagined them, jumping out of bed, fueled by green smoothies and determination, pulling on their designer leggings. He felt a heaviness in his limbs, a mental fog that no amount of expensive coffee would burn away. His finger moved, not to confirm but to cancel. A little pop-up asked, "Are you sure? You'll lose your priority booking status?" He was sure. He sank into his couch, the worn fabric cool through his t-shirt. He scrolled. Another influencer in a pristine home gym, talking about biohacking your mitochondria. An ad for a new wearable that measured stress biomarkers in real time. A podcast titled, "Maximizing Your Sleep Syncing for Peak Performance." It was a tsunami of solutions, each one promising to be the missing piece. He bought so many missing pieces he was bankrupt. And that's when he asked himself the question. It wasn't a loud, dramatic moment. It was a quiet, ugly whisper in the back of his mind, beneath the fatigue and the frustration. What if I'm not the problem? It felt like a dangerous thought. A rebellious one. He'd always believed the narrative. If he just worked harder, bought the right program, woke up earlier, drank the adaptogen-packed shake, he'd unlock the next level. His failure was a personal failing of discipline. But the whisper persisted, shaped by 18 day 14 resets and a credit card bill full of wellness subscriptions. What if the reason you can't get fitter isn't your discipline, but your obedience? The word hung in the air, obedience. He was obedient. Obedient to the apps, to the influencers, to the gym schedule, to the complex, expensive rules of modern fitness. He was a model student in a class that kept flunking him. He looked back at his phone. The CrossFit Games athlete was frozen mid-lift, a statue of human potential. The caption underneath her still promised that consistency and community were the keys. A cold, clear doubt crystallized in his mind for the very first time. It wasn't about the athlete. It was about the game itself. What if the rules were wrong? What if the entire system, the one selling him the gear, the programs, the memberships, the hope was designed not to get him to the finish line, but to keep him forever buying new shoes for a race he'd never run?
The thought was so unsettling, he actually stood up. The gray light had finally strengthened, washing his cluttered apartment in a pale, honest glow. He could see the dust on the Peloton screen. He could see the unopened bands. He could see the reflection of his own tired face in the dark TV screen. He had followed every rule he'd been given, and he was more stuck, more frustrated, and more tired than ever. The cliffhanger wasn't on his phone screen. It was in his chest, a tiny, fragile crack in a wall he didn't even know he'd built. He thought about that banned list from the CrossFit Games. The news article had been vague, calling them neuropriming and metabolic flex protocols. He'd pictured high-tech gadgets, illegal pills. But what if the real secret, the thing so powerful it had to be banned from the world's toughest fitness competition, wasn't something you added to your life? What if it was something you stopped doing? The alarm on his phone went off for real this time. The generic marimba ringtone slicing through the quiet. It was 6:15. Time to get ready for work. Time to step back into the stream of emails, deadlines, and the persistent, quiet ache of a promise he'd made to himself that he still didn't know how to keep. But for the first time in 547 identical mornings, a new question was spinning in the silence, a question that felt both terrifying and like the first full breath of air after being underwater for too long. If the rulebook is keeping you from winning, what happens when you decide to close it? That's where our story begins, not with a heroic sprint, but with a single, quiet moment of doubt. And that doubt, my friend, is the most powerful muscle you'll ever learn to flex. Alex sat in his usual spot at the back of the 7:15 a.m. bus, rattling towards downtown Seattle. The rain streaked the windows in diagonal lines, turning the world outside into a wet, gray blur of coffee shops and condo towers. He had his noise-canceling headphones on, but he wasn't listening to a podcast about peak performance or an audiobook on habit stacking. For once he was just listening to the silence and to that strange new question still echoing in his head from the morning. He watched the other passengers, a woman in full Lululemon, carefully balancing a $12 green juice between her knees while she typed furiously on her phone. A guy wearing a whoop strap and a sleeveless puffer jacket, doing subtle neck rotations. Everyone was geared up, tuned in, and optimized, including him. He looked down at his own outfit, technical fabric shirt, expensive trail running shoes he only wore on pavement. He felt like a cosplayer, someone dressed as a person who had their life together. This was the identity trap, and he was living right in the middle of it. He'd bought the uniform. He'd learned the language. He'd shown up for the photo ops. But the promised transformation, it was always 6 weeks away, just after the next purchase, the next program, the next revolutionary thing. He got to his office, a converted warehouse in South Lake Union with exposed ductwork and the faint, ever-present smell of cold brew coffee. At his desk, he did what he always did. He placed his fancy water bottle just so. He opened his laptop, and next to it, he placed his fitness tracker, syncing it with a sigh. The little screen showed a pathetic red bar, 42% sleep score, recommend light activity today. He felt a flash of anger, hot and sudden. This $300 device was scolding him. It was giving him a failing grade on his own rest, and he was listening to it. This was the villain, not laziness. He wasn't lazy. He was exhausted. The villain was the false belief, the one sold in 1 million ads and echoed in 1,000 Instagram captions. If I invest enough money, wear the right gear, and publicly commit, my biology will have no choice but to comply. He believed if he looked the part, he would become the part. If his credit card statement read like a fitness expo receipt, his body would have to follow. It was the belief of the consumer athlete, and Alex was their perfect customer. Let me tell you about another perfect customer. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah lived in Denver, in a beautiful ranch-style house with a 2-car garage. But you couldn't park a car in that garage. It was a temple to the consumer-athlete dream. One wall had a mirror, its screen dark and reflective. Next to it was a tonal, the digital weight arms folded in like a sleeping robot. There was a row of perfect, pristine Rogue kettlebells, lined up by color. A Peloton bike, a yoga mat rack with 6 different mats, a Theragun in its charging dock, ready to pummel imaginary soreness. Sarah was 33, a project manager for a big renewable energy firm. She was smart, successful, and utterly lost. Her phone was a museum of abandoned fitness apps. She had completed, or more accurately, started, 137 different 6-week challenges from Instagram trainers. She could tell you the macro breakdown of a chickpea, but couldn't tell you the last time she actually felt strong or alive in her own body. Her workout log was a graveyard of franchises, F45, Orange Theory, Pure Barre, CrossFit, Pilates. She'd done it all. Her biggest fitness expenditure wasn't effort. It was cognitive load. The mental energy spent researching the perfect program, shopping for the perfect outfit for that program, scheduling the classes, logging the food, tracking the sleep, analyzing the recovery scores. The actual workout was just a brief, stressful event in the middle of a swirling storm of data and consumption.
She was the ideal client for every fitness company in America, and she had nothing to show for it but a maxed-out credit card and a deep, hidden well of shame. She believed the lie that the next purchase would be the key. The lie that her commitment was measured in dollars, not in consistent, quiet effort. Back in Seattle, Alex was falling into the same pattern. He saw an ad for a new neuromuscular electrical stimulation, sleeve wear it at your desk and build muscle. His finger actually hovered over the Shop Now button. It was so tempting. A solution that required no effort, just more money. That was the trap. It was comfortable. It felt like progress. Buying something new always gives you a little hit of hope, a dopamine spark that feels like momentum. He closed the ad tab, frustrated with himself. He looked out his office window at the gym across the street. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, he could see the 8:30 a.m. class in full swing. 20 people moving in unison, like a factory line of exertion, their faces tense in the mirror. It looked like community. It sounded like pounding music and shouted encouragement. But from here, it also looked like a beautifully branded hamster wheel, and that's when he saw it. A notification popped up on his screen from a news aggregator. The headline was bizarre. ***, CrossFit Games 2025 bans, 3 biohacks. Athletes caught using neuropriming and metabolic flex protocols. ***, he clicked. The article was full of typical sports drama language, unfair advantage, integrity of the sport, shadowy techniques. The banned list wasn't a list of drugs or steroids. It was vague and sci-fi sounding neuropriming protocols, metabolic flex sequencing, and circadian override techniques. The report said these weren't pills or injections. but behavioral and technological methodologies that gave users a statistically insurmountable recovery and adaptation edge. The comment section was chaos. People were guessing everything from secret brain-zapping helmets to genetically modified algae shakes. But Alex didn't read the comments. He read the headline again, and he thought about Sarah's garage full of unused gear. He thought about his own guilt rack. He thought about the 42% sleep score scolding him. What if the real biohack, the thing so powerful it threatened the whole show, wasn't about adding another piece of tech, another supplement, another layer of complexity? What if it was about subtraction? The thought was a jolt. It felt illegal in itself. In a world screaming at you to buy more, do more, track more, consume more, the most powerful move might be to stop. He pictured the game's athletes, the ones who supposedly used these banned methods. He didn't picture them covered in more gadgets. He pictured them calmer, more focused, recovering faster not because of a $5,000 recovery pod, but because they had hacked out the noise. They had removed the things that drained them, the pointless complexity, the obedience to broken rules. The villain wasn't his lack of effort. The villain was the entire story he'd been sold, that fitness is a product you purchase, a costume you wear, a complex science you need a PhD to manage. The identity trap is believing you are what you buy, that you are the sum of your subscriptions, that your value is in your gear, not in your actions. Alex leaned back in his chair. The rain had stopped, and a sudden, brilliant slice of winter sun cut through the office, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. It lit up his useless fitness tracker, making the pathetic red sleep score glow. For the first time, he looked at that number and didn't see a failure. He saw a question. What if the top 0.1% of athletes, the ones who push human limits, had discovered a simple, terrifying secret? A secret so effective that the only way to protect the old game was to ban it? And what if that secret had nothing to do with what they started doing, and everything to do with what they finally, courageously stopped? The bus ride home felt different. He saw the same people, the same gear, the same tired, determined faces. But the filter had changed. He wasn't seeing athletes. He was seeing fellow prisoners beautifully dressed, following a rule book that was designed to keep them running in place, forever spending, forever striving, forever just shy of the finish line. He got home. He didn't change into gym clothes. He didn't sync a device. He just sat on his couch in the quiet and let the question hang there, warm and alive in his chest. The crack in the wall was getting wider, and a little light was starting to shine through. The problem with a quiet, rebellious thought is that it doesn't stay quiet for long. It starts to whisper to you in the middle of your daily routines. It was Thursday, 2 days after Alex's morning of doubt, and he was in the WeWork kitchen in Austin, Texas. He was there for a quarterly planning summit, surrounded by the buzzing energy of 100 other startups. The air smelled of stale popcorn and ambition. He was supposed to be at a lunchtime WADA, a CrossFit-style workout, at a gym 3 blocks away. His bag was packed, his shoes were in it. The class was booked. The old Alex, the obedient Alex, was screaming at him from inside his head. Go. You're already falling behind. This is how you stay consistent. This is how you build community. But the new, quiet voice just asked a simple question. Why? Not in a lazy way, in a real way. Why was he about to spend 60 minutes of his only break in an 11-hour workday, rushing through unfamiliar streets to a crowded, loud box gym, to fling himself against a workout program for a 25-year-old full-time athlete, all so he could be exhausted for his 2 p.m. budget meeting? What was this actually for?
He stood there, holding his overpriced kale salad, and felt the war happening right between his temples. It was a civil war. On one side, a lifetime of conditioning, of no days off, of crush it, of believing that any rest was weakness. On the other side, this fragile new idea that maybe the smartest thing he could do for his body was less. He walked back to his temporary desk, a tiny pod overlooking 6th Street. He put the salad down. He put the gym bag on the floor. He opened his laptop, not to work, but to a blank document. The cursor blinked, impatient, judgmental. This was the moment. The first illegal step. It wasn't a dramatic lunge or a heavy lift. It was a decision to think, honestly, for himself. His fingers started to type. The words came out clumsy, like he was using a muscle he'd forgotten he had. The 3-band Biohacks are probably not gadgets, he wrote. The sentence looked absurd on the screen, obvious, but saying it, writing it, made it real. Their behaviors. What are the 3 behaviors my current routine is avoiding? The resistance hit him like a wave. It was mental, but it felt physical. A tightness in his chest. A voice that sounded suspiciously like a mashup of every fitness influencer he'd ever followed. You're just looking for an excuse. You're overcomplicating it. Just follow the program. Don't be special. Put your head down and grind. He looked out the window. He could see the gym sign glowing in the gray afternoon. He could almost hear the thump of the music, the clang of weights. It was a siren song, calling him back to the familiar struggle, the noble suffering. It was so much easier to just go and be tired than to sit here and face this unsettling quiet. He closed his eyes. He remembered Sarah's garage, that museum of good intentions. He remembered the 42% sleep score. He remembered the feeling of being a cosplayer in his own life. His fingers went back to the keyboard. Under the question, he typed a single number. 1. He took a deep breath, the kind that shakes a little on the way in. And then he wrote it. Train. Less. Not more. He stared at it. It looked like heresy. It looked like surrender. In the lexicon he'd lived by, it was the ultimate sin. Less was for quitters, for the weak, for the people who didn't want it badly enough. But then, a memory surfaced. Not of a triumphant workout, but of a specific, miserable week last fall. He'd been on point, hitting 6 workouts, hitting his macros, tracking everything. And by Friday, he'd gotten a cold so bad he spent the weekend in bed. His body had just given up. He'd been so busy training that he'd forgotten to listen. What if training less didn't mean being lazy? What if it meant being strategic? What if his current plan, modeled after professional athletes with recovery teams and all-day naps, was like trying to run a jet engine on lawnmower fuel? Of course, it was sputtering. Of course, he was always on the brink of breakdown. The microscopic victory wasn't in his body. It was on the screen. It was in the act of writing down a truth he had felt in his bones, but had been too afraid to say. He opened his gym app. He found his reservations. He had one for today, one for tomorrow, one for Saturday morning. His thumb hovered over the first one. The cancel booking button was a deep, warning red. It felt like pressing a big red failure button. He could feel his heart beating in his throat. This was it. This is where the path forked. 95% of people, he realized, would never press this button. Because doing nothing feels like cheating. It feels like you're getting away with something. The guilt is immediate and heavy. We're taught that struggle is virtuous, that suffering is the price of entry. But what if the price was wrong? He pressed it. The screen flashed. Class canceled. You have used one of 3 late cancels this month. A little sting of punishment. He didn't stop. He canceled the next one, and the next. 3 red cancellation confirmations in a row. 3 little acts of rebellion. He put his phone down, screen first, on the desk. He expected to feel a flood of guilt, of anxiety. Instead, he felt space, a weird, hollowed-out calm. The time from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. was suddenly, mysteriously, his own. Not the gym's, his. He ate his salad slowly, tasting it for the first time that week. He didn't scroll on his phone. He just looked out the window, watching the city move. He noticed the light changing on the buildings. He noticed a bird building a nest in the eaves of an old brick building. Simple things, quiet things. This was the first crack in the dam. Not a huge explosion, but a single hairline fracture. And on the other side of that crack wasn't weakness. It was a simple, profound truth. Respect. Respect for his tired, nervous system. Respect for the fact he was a 31-year-old man with a stressful job, not a games athlete. Respect for his own time as the most non-renewable resource he had. Finished his lunch. The 2 p.m. meeting was in 15 minutes. He felt different. Not pumped up, not buzzed on endorphins. He felt clear. The mental fog that usually followed a hard lunchtime workout was absent. His head was quiet. He looked at the blank document still open on his screen, at the one line he'd written. 1. Train less, not more. He knew right then that this was the foundation of everything. The first banned behavior, the thing the elite athletes had figured out. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And they had stopped listening to the noise telling them to constantly pour. The other 2 behaviors? He didn't know them yet. But he knew they would be about listening, not just doing. About being a human, not a machine. He closed his laptop. The gym bag sat there, untouched, a relic from a life he was trying to leave behind. Instead of picking it up, he walked to the conference room. The old script in his head screamed that he was falling behind. 3 missed workouts meant 3 lost opportunities to get better, stronger, faster. But a new, quieter voice whispered something else entirely. It said that by canceling those workouts, he had just done the most productive thing for his long-term health in years. He had given himself permission to stop the bleeding. You see, sometimes the bravest, most powerful move isn't to push harder against the wall. It's to take 1 step back and realize you can just walk around it. They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But nobody talks about the step before that one, the one where you stop walking in the wrong direction. That's the step that changes everything. And if this feels familiar, maybe you've just taken it. And now, for the first time, you're finally facing the right way. The space Alex created by canceling those workouts didn't stay empty for long. As they say, nature abhors a vacuum, and modern life, it really, really hates quiet. The old urges tried to rush right back in. The next evening, back in his apartment, that old itch returned. It was 6 p.m., his usual iron circuit time. His body felt twitchy, his mind restless. He felt guilty for not being tired. This was the daily war. Not a war against weights, but a war against a lifetime of conditioning. He knew he couldn't just do nothing. That would feel like failure. The old script was just too loud. So he had to write a new one small action at a time. This was his new protocol, his personal rebellion against the cult of more. First, he tackled what he called intentional inaction. The biohacking articles promised unfair mental clarity from neuropriming gadgets. Alex's version was way simpler. That night, before even thinking about exercise, he set a timer on his phone for just 10 minutes. He sat on his living room floor, back against the couch. No focus music, no meditation app. He didn't try to empty his mind. He just sat. And the silence was deafening. It wasn't peaceful. It was itchy. His brain was a popcorn machine of thoughts. You should be working out. You're wasting time. Check your email. What's the news? Is this even doing anything? He felt a real, physical urge to jump up and just do something. This was the internal battle, raw and real. It wasn't about relaxing. It was about sitting in the deep discomfort of not performing. He focused on the feeling of the rug under his palms, the faint smell of last night's dinner, the distant whoosh of a bus on the street below. And then, around minute 7, something shifted. The frantic thoughts didn't stop, but they slowed down, like watching snowflakes settle in a snow globe. He wasn't trying to empty his mind. He was just letting it be full, without reacting to every thought. When the timer chimed, he opened his eyes. The room looked exactly the same, but he felt different, centered, present. For the first time in years, he wasn't about to work out because a schedule told him to. He was about to move because he was here, in his body, and it just felt like the right thing to do. He ended up doing 20 minutes of simple kettlebell swings and goblet squats. No timer, no rep count, just moving well until he felt that good kind of tired, not the crushed, defeated kind. It was the most mindful workout of his life. Next up was Behavior 2, his version of what the articles called metabolic flex. He translated it to something simpler: post-wound nutrition. This was the hardest one. The tech gurus claimed their methods allowed for precise fuel utilization beyond standard macro tracking. Alex's translation: stop eating for a spreadsheet and start eating for your actual hunger. The next day at lunch in the buzzing company cafeteria, he committed to the experiment. He got a simple piece of grilled salmon, some rice, and broccoli. He sat down with his colleagues, who were all busy scanning barcodes into their macro tracking apps. He ate slowly. He actually put his fork down between bites. He talked to people instead of calculating his intake. And then, halfway through the plate, he paused. He asked himself the forbidden question: am I still hungry? Not, have I hit my protein goal for this meal? Just, am I hungry? The answer was no. He was satisfied. The internal resistance was fierce. A voice screamed at him about wasted protein, about stoking the metabolic flame, about the money he was wasting by leaving food on his plate. He saw a colleague nudge his own container of pre-measured chicken and sweet potato. He felt a wave of judgment, real or imagined. But he pushed the plate away, food still on it. It felt radical. It felt like leaving money on the table, but deep in his gut, it felt right. He wasn't stuffed. He wasn't thinking about his next meal for the rest of the afternoon, and that 3 p.m. energy crash he always got. It never came. Finally, Behavior 3, sleep sovereignty. This was his answer to the circadian override tech. This was the most concrete change of all. He went to a stationery store and bought a small gray metal lockbox for about $13. That night, at 9 p.m., he put his phone in it. He didn't just put it on Do Not Disturb. He didn't just leave it in another room. He put it in a box with a physical combination lock. The solid click of that latch closing was the most final sound he'd heard in ages. That first night felt like withdrawal. He paced around his apartment. He had a sudden, panicked thought that he needed to check tomorrow's weather. He desperately wanted to just scroll, to numb out and zone out. The silence in his apartment was immense. So he picked up a real paper book and read for 40 minutes. His eyes grew heavy in a way they never did when staring at a screen. He fell asleep, without knowing his sleep score, without being tracked or analyzed. He just slept. And he woke up at 6 a.m. before his analog alarm clock even went off, feeling a deep cellular sense of rest that he hadn't known since he was a kid. These weren't hacks. They were unhacks. Intentional inaction, eating for hunger, and reclaiming his sleep. By stepping back from the relentless pressure to optimize, Alex didn't lose his edge. He found it. He found the space to listen to his own body, to trust his own signals. And in that quiet space, he found a more sustainable, more powerful version of health than any app or gadget could ever promise. It turns out, sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is get back to basics. Thanks for watching.
Setbacks were inevitable. 3 days in, after a brutal workday, he came home and devoured an entire pizza while watching Netflix, his phone freed from its box early. He felt bloated and defeated. The old story came roaring back. C? You can't do it. You need the strict rules. But this was the new war, handling the failure without the old self-loathing narrative. Instead of thinking, I blew it, the whole thing is ruined, he just thought, that happened. He noticed the stress that led to it. He went to bed, and the next morning he just started again. No drama, no punishment. He put the phone in the box that night. He sat for his 10 minutes of inaction. It wasn't about perfection. It was about returning to the protocol like a pilot correcting course. He didn't track pounds or inches. He started a simple paper calendar on his fridge, not for workouts, but for behaviors. A red X for days he used the phone jail. A green check for days he did his intentional inaction. A blue dot for days he ate to satisfaction, not to fullness. The visual timeline wasn't of a body changing, but of a mind reclaiming territory. The streak was about autonomy, not punishment. Community changed shape entirely. The old community was performative, posting the sweaty selfie, waiting for the likes, comparing times on the leaderboard. It was external validation. His new community was a private signal chat with his friend Maya in Portland and his sister in Chicago. The rule was simple. Once a day you send one sentence. No photos, no metrics. Just a sentence about the real experience. Maya wrote, sucked for 10 minutes. Mostly thought about my annoying boss. But I sat. His sister wrote, left 3 bites of pasta on my plate. Felt powerful and weird. Alex wrote, phone in box at 9:07. Felt like I was missing something. Then remembered I wasn't. It was private, honest, and deeply accountable. They weren't cheering for reps. They were witnessing a quiet rebellion. Weeks passed. A visual time-lapse of his life would have shown something subtle but profound. The clutter of protein powder tubs and supplement bottles slowly disappearing from his kitchen counter. The gym bag permanently stowed in the closet. A single, well-used kettlebell living by the balcony door. The dark circles under his eyes, visible in every Zoom call for the past 2 years, slowly fading. He wasn't getting jacked, he was getting calm. His face lost its pinched, perpetually stressed look. His movements became looser, more fluid. The war wasn't against his body. It was against the noise. The war was fought every evening with the click of a lockbox. Every lunch with the courage to leave food on a plate. Every pre-workout moment spent sitting on a rug, listening to the sound of his own breath. He was hacking back the endless, tangled overgrowth of shoulds and musts that had choked his fitness and his life. And with every quiet, deliberate action, he was finding something he thought the elite athletes had stolen, a sense of peace, and his own untracked, unoptimized, beautifully human power. The secret wasn't in adding more. It was in the brave, daily art of leaving good enough alone. September, the light in Seattle changes. It becomes softer, golden, slanting through the buildings in long, dramatic lines that make even the gray concrete look warm. Alex stood on a trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains, 3,000 miles from home, breathing air that tasted of pine and cold earth. He wasn't wearing a fitness tracker. He hadn't posted a nature grind selfie. He was just there. 3 days of hiking, carrying a pack, sleeping in a tent. A trip planned on a whim with his old college friends. A year ago, he would have trained for this. He'd have followed a specific backpacking conditioning program for 8 weeks, stressed about his ankle mobility, packed individual bags of protein powder. He'd have been exhausted before he even started. This time he just went. And as he stood on that overlook, watching the mountains fold into each other like blue velvet under the morning sun, he realized something. He wasn't destroyed, his knees didn't ache. His breath came easy. He felt strong, not in a look at my muscles way, but in a deep, quiet way. Like his body was a reliable tool, not a problem to be solved. The durability he'd found wasn't listed on any supplement label. It was the product of 9 months of subtraction, of intentional inaction, of listening. This was the new normal. The tangible benefits weren't what he'd been sold. They were better. He spent $47 a month now, a basic gym membership for when it rained for weeks, which in Seattle was often. He'd saved over $2,000 on subscriptions, gadgets, and special foods in a year. The back pain that used to hum constantly from his standing desk? Gone? The 3 p.m. energy crash? A memory. His annual physical blood work came back with the inflammatory markers of someone 10 years younger. His doctor had asked, "Started meditating?" Alex just smiled and said, something like that. The performance, the kind he used to chase with such desperation, had arrived as a quiet side effect. Not as the goal, but as a gift, because he stopped trying to force his biology into a spreadsheet and started partnering with it instead. The ripple effect was the strangest part. It started to bleed into everything. At work, he found himself declining meetings that had no clear agenda. He called it calendar in action. He started cooking simple meals without photographing them, enjoying the smell of garlic and olive oil, the sound of vegetables sizzling just for the pleasure of it. He read books, actual paper books, and found he could follow complex stories again, his focus no longer shattered into a million digital pieces.